Welcome back. Let's do Act 6 again. But this time, we're going to act a little bit clueless.
So far, so good. Keep it up.
Thank you. I won't.
Thank you for coming to this inquest, Miss Bow. As the coroner on this case, I'm going to informally question you and study the evidence you've collected. If you assist me in developing a case, the perpetrators will be tried in the formal court of law. We're primarily concerned with the museum murders, but we're also interested in the theft of the Dagger of Amon Ra and other matters that may have a bearing on this case. My examination of the corpses has been fruitful, but I need more evidence to build a case. Any information you can give us would help, but you must justify your conclusions with the evidence you've acquired. False accusations and unsupported conclusions will not be tolerated. Although I don't wish to pressure you, your employer is also here to judge your performance on this investigation. Since this is an informal proceeding, I've allowed it on the basis that your newspaper will cooperate with our wishes. Now, to the questions. Who murdered Dr. Pippin Carter?
Well, let's see. Who murdered Dr. Pippin Carter? Indeed. I mean, obviously, that was Dr. Smith, who clearly wanted revenge for him removing the dagger from Egypt. Makes perfect sense.
Who murdered Lawrence Ziggy Ziegfeld?
Ziggy, well, funny story actually. Ernie was working on the pterodactyl and it accidentally came loose, thereby leading to the death of Ziggy. Ernie was then afraid that he'd get blamed for the accidental death, so he cut Ziggy's head off to make it look like a murder. So yeah, that was Ernie, and it was an accident.
Who murdered Ernie Leach?
Also funny story, he was so distressed about what happened to Ziggy earlier that he wasn't paying attention while working on the alcohol vats and accidentally fell in and drowned. He was then later rescued by recovered by Detective O'Reilly, which is why the latter smelled like alcohol. It all makes sense, you see? And if, accidentally killing somebody and then falling into an alcohol vat doesn't qualify as a bad day, then I don't know what does.
Who murdered Yvette Delacroix?
See, here you have to kind of think a bit more deeply about it. You see, remember the flapper girl in the speakeasy? She kind of hinted that the Countess Waldorf Carlton was perhaps lesbian. And she, as a result, was very jealous that Yvette was interested in all those guys but was paying no attention to her. And as a result, she murdered her. So that was because of jealousy.
Who murdered Countess Lavinia Waldorf Carlton?
Well, in this particular case, it was actually a struggle. While the Countess was trying to kill Yvette, Yvette fought back and killed the Countess in turn in self-defense.
Who was the skeleton found in the steamer trunk?
This skeleton. Well, this was actually because Dr. Miklos, she really was interested in Wolf's scars, and she was examining them a little bit too close and ended up accidentally releasing the domestic beetles on Wolf. So,
Who
that's what happened
actually
there.
stole the Dagger of Amon Ra from the Ancient Egypt exhibit?
Of course, the theft, as we all know, if you've been paying attention, it should be pretty obvious. It was Steve all along.
Who was the woman involved in stealing paintings from the Old Masters Gallery?
Well, now here he says woman, but actually, I believe it was Dr. Carrington, who, despite being museum president, was also a famous crossdresser and thief.
Based on our own investigation, your conclusion is incorrect, Miss Bow. Two of the men who were murdered were involved with one of the female victims in a plan to steal the paintings. We have a report on that woman telling us she appeared at an appointment in the medieval armor exhibit sometime after the party. She was unaware that her partner in crime was dead at that point, and she was seen carrying paintings. If she'd been confronted at that time with evidence that her partner was dead, she might well have confessed to her crime. Who is the high priest of the Amon Ra sun worshippers?
Yeah, so this is one area where the game gives you some hints, at least for the optional stuff. If you get things wrong, then it kind of tells you how you could have known the right answer. It doesn't do that for the actual murderer, though, so that's just up to you to figure out, I guess. No notebook with missing stuff in this game. Alright, so who is the High Priest? Again, I'm kind of confused how you could not know this, considering that I don't think you can get here without going through the ceremony room and seeing him plain as day. Then again, maybe he was just pretending to be the High Priest, and the actual High Priest was Detective O'Reilly.
That accusation is false, Miss Bow. However, the High Priest's identity is a carefully guarded secret, so your failure to identify him is nothing to be ashamed about. He was present at the museum party, but was rarely seen afterwards. One witness said he was spotted briefly in the office of Yvette Delacroix. Which museum employee runs a fencing operation as a sideline business?
Yeah, so they're giving you hints on how to find out something you can't possibly not know at this point in the game. Unless I'm completely wrong, and there is a way to get to Act 6 without going through the basement of the the museum. If there is one, I don't know. Well, who ran the fencing operation? Well, I mean, we gotta go for the obvious option here. That was Watney Little.
Incorrect, Miss Bow. If I were you, I would have looked through the garbage in people's offices. Trash cans are often a good source of clues. Miss Bow, please remember in the future that you're a reporter, not a detective. By interfering at crime scenes, you make it much more difficult for the police to do their jobs. Not only are your conclusions based on unfounded guesswork, you don't even have any evidence to back them up. By your presence at the murder scenes and your destruction of evidence, I'm tempted to conclude that you were the murderer. You neglected to thoroughly question all the suspects, and you missed important evidence at the crime scenes. Although you discovered the Dagger of Amon Ra, you have not arrived at conclusions about the theft that make any sense to me. I believe the theft involved two people, one of whom must have been on the museum staff. Because of you, a murderer is running loose in this city, free to kill again. I hope you're proud of yourself, Miss Bow.
Oh well, we got it wrong. Laura Bow bungles investigation. Dagger still missing and killer goes
Since
free.
his skeleton was so nicely cleaned by the domestic beetles, Dr. Carrington's bones will soon be hanging on display in the Leyendecker Museum. Yvette Delacroix died plastered. Her remarkably lifelike statue now lives on in the Old Masters Gallery of the Leyendecker Museum. Her memory lives on in the minds of all she touched. Her sculpture is attributed to artist unknown. Dr. Pippin Carter, wherever he is quite displeased. You did not recover the Dagger of Amon Ra, nor did you find his murderer. Therefore, Pippin feels it is only fair that he should haunt you for the rest of your life. Indirectly, as a result of your total failure, Wolf Heimlich was fired from his job as Chief of Security at the Leyendecker Museum. 1 year later, still out of work, he committed suicide in military fashion by falling on his sword. Having died in the course of this story, Watney Little's life of crime came to an abrupt end. As he was not a nice man, nobody missed him. After Wolf Heimlich was fired from his job as Chief of Security, Dr. Olympia Miklos moved to Montana to do full-time field research in paleontology, digging in the rich fossil beds she found there. Her greatest find was the carnivorous Olympiasaurus dinosaur. As fond as he was of the Leyendecker, Ernie Leach noted in his will that he wanted his body donated to the museum. His body now resides in numerous small jars of alcohol, which will be placed on display in the new Hall of Internal Biology, adjacent to the Hall of Late Mammals. Since the Dagger of Amon Ra was not recovered, Dr. Patasheptut Tut Smith was forced to commit suicide with a fake Dagger of Amon Ra from the Leyendecker Museum gift shop. After losing his head in the museum, Ziggy found himself unable to continue his criminal career. His head has been preserved and is now on display in the life mask exhibit at the Leyendecker Museum. Ramses Najir continued his successful career as an accountant and as head of the secret Egyptian cult of Amon Ra. With his strong high society ties, his accounting business made Ramses a millionaire in 15 years. Having died from a snake bite, the Countess Lavinia Waldorf Carleton did not live long enough to inherit any money from her last husband, Sterling. Extremely unimpressed by your total failure as a reporter, Sam Augustini fired you. Later that same year, he was mugged with a gift shop duplicate of the Dagger of Amon Ra and died from his wounds. He blames you for his death. Since you were fired after your total failure at the museum, Crodfuller T. Rhubarb continued the investigation, found the Dagger of Amon Ra and the murderer, and won a Pulitzer Prize for his excellent work. Henri Lemore, the coroner, continued his successful career studying dead bodies for the next 50 years, finally retiring in 1976 to tour with a rock band, the Ungrateful Dead. Low Fat continued in the laundry business, eventually opening a chain of low-fat Chinese laundries across the country and becoming a millionaire in the process. Detective Ryan Hanrahan O'Reilly continued in his job and became a full-time homicide detective. Having amassed a small fortune by being frugal, he retired to Ireland 3 years later. Steve Dorian was quite upset by the unfortunate event that happened to you later that night. Stunned by your total failure and the unfortunate event that occurred to you later that evening, John Bowes spent his remaining years in a New Orleans mental institution. After you gave it away, the Dagger of Amon Ra vanished. 20 years later, in 1946, it mysteriously appeared on the doorstep of the Cairo Museum in Egypt. There was human blood on the blade, as if it was some kind of a message.
You had your chance and you blew it, Laura Bow. This is what happens to interfering reporters.
Well, that didn't go quite as well for anyone, really. It's kind of weird how the coroner acknowledges that you found the dagger, but then the rest of the ending does not. Except for the very end where it says that you gave it away. Let's just be happy that the real ending is a heck of a lot happier.